Any questions?
Sean, it seems like the quarterbacks are pretty accurate today overall with Bridgewater and Payton.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, look, we had a number of periods. We had a third down period. We'll take a peek at the tape. I thought the defense did pretty well in the 2-minute drill at the end. I thought the practice coming off of I thought last night was one of our better practices, and I felt like they followed up today with another good practice on both sides of the ball. So, there'll be a little time now where they're off. We're kind of into our Tuesday off day and kind of go from there.
Sean, A.J. Klein said the other day, these players are good at coaching themselves when something breaks down, doing it on the fly. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think some of that comes from a little bit of experience. It's a little harder typically for maybe the first-year player, but hopefully if you're looking at the right type of guys and we're placing a high value on football intelligence, at some point during the course of a game, there's some things that are going to happen maybe that you hopefully have covered, and yet sometimes you're going to rely on your leaders on either side of the ball that are out there for that play to react in a favorable way. But I think some of that comes with just time on task and experience in what we're doing.
Coach, without Alvin and Drew on the field, what does it mean to them to be able to?
Excuse me?
With Alvin and Drew not on the practice field, they're not playing. What does that kind of give them practice-wise, and why is it important to give them that extra time?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it last night. We'll do a load prevention list, and the idea of that is to, selectively look at a few different players relative to the kind of reps they're getting, might be their age, might be injury-related, recovery, and try to map out ahead of time a plan that allows that player maybe to recover one extra day. And so there's 3 different groups in that. There's a group coming off of surgery, call it group 1, and the second group might be a veteran group that's played quite a while, and the third group might be the fewest amount, there might be just a couple sprinkled in. So that's the goal.
Coach, the Ravens and the Jaguars held a moment of silence this morning to remember the victims of the shootings this past weekend. Did you do anything like that with your team?
I did not, and I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad someone in our league did, and that was good thinking, and probably something that was significant to those 2 teams, and certainly, and something like that comes up in 2 different cities. It's tragic, it's disappointing, and it just keeps repeating itself. So I'm not going to get into a long political answer here. I'll just say that.
Coach Payton, with Zigbo, did you sell him on that Pierre Thomas coming, Chris Ivory, Kai Robinson? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think our history speaks for itself. I think the agents are able to see that, especially into our 13th year. I mean, we deal with a lot of these same agents, and they understand that, and so hopefully he feels like, hey, I got to go out and put my best stuff on tape and see where that lays.
Does each preseason game have a different personality or a different purpose?
To some degree, I think there's a philosophy with all of them. How we're playing guys can vary in each game. Tomorrow we'll meet as a staff and we'll go through the roles relative to Minnesota, like the play count we expect. We'll discuss every player that's dressed in the game. How many plays we'd like to see them play in the kicking game, both offensively and defensively, and then the key is then communicating that so we have an organized game, and we're not stuck with 10 guys on the field. It's a little bit harder in the kicking game sometimes, but from that standpoint, I would say week by week there might be some differences. I think from a competitive standpoint and trying to win and trying to put your best foot forward, that would be consistent in each week.
Because some of your offensive linemen before training camp got together for the offensive line master summit. Were you aware of that? And what are your thoughts on players getting together like that and sharing
I'm
ideas?
all for it. I wasn't aware of that. Where's the national summit at?
It's in Dallas. It's held by Duke Manning.
Yep. Okay. And look, there are a handful of places where certain positions train, and I know Phoenix, Dallas, they get quite a few offensive linemen. So, but I wasn't aware that there was a summit. What's the definition of a summit?
They all got together and shared ideas.
7. Once you get to 7, it's a summit. I don't know.
I'd like someone to look up what a summit is. I feel like it's much too important for anything we do. A summit.
Sean, did you look much into Jared Cook's background and try to identify what kind of held him back from having the kind of season he had last year, or why he didn't have more?
Look, I saw real good film when he was in St. Louis.
Yeah.
I saw real good film last year, and so anytime you're in free agency, you gather as much information as you can, and then when the player arrives, there's certain things you weren't aware of that are good, maybe sometimes weren't so good. In his case, it was all positive. He was a tremendous worker, dedicated, I think someone who's a true pro in every sense of the word, and I think that he's been a real good addition for us.
Do you think it's not a coincidence that he thrived in John Gruden's offense?
Well, I think sometimes there's a fit. Sometimes there's a fit, and maybe some other places it's more difficult. So there's a little bit of, is it the right script for success? There've been a lot of real good actors in poor movies, and there've been a lot of poor actors in poor movies. So I think it's up to us to really look closely at the things that he does well and feature those things.
Yeah, I heard you on Sirius XM. He's high on the garage sale test or whatever
my parents love garage sales. So every Saturday and Sunday, that was their hobby together, and they would go garage sailing and come back. We probably had about 10 different sofas growing up, and each one met with the same enthusiasm when it arrived. And then every once in a while you'd lean back and it'd be like a leg off. You're like, this is why it was for sale. So we knew we were getting another one. That was their thing.
Do you remember 2 years ago what the genesis was from claiming Taysom?
I remember everything about it.
Who first came up with the idea, hey, well, let's try this guy somewhere else?
Well, so the claim takes place and he comes in. We know we have a real good athlete. We're excited about it. We were worried that he might not get to 11. We were 11th in the claiming order. And the first weekend he gets to play significantly in special teams, we were at our inactive list, and generally there's a handful of injured guys in that list. They're naturally going to be inactive. And we were at 8 with 4 injured players and then 4 guys available, and we just discussed each of the 4 players. And I said to Mike Westhoff, what about Hill? And Mike was one of those guys, I'll take him. And he came out, and that was his first exposure to the kicking game and special teams, and he played very well in that game. He wasn't playing that role that we use offensively as much, but we knew we had a real good athlete that loved football, and so it kind of was born out of one extra spot because of injury.
Sean, if I can recall, I think it might have been his rookie year. We played in the Patriots, and Julian Edelman, I think he's back there. College quarterback, he runs back a punt, seemed like 25, 30 yards. Was that a vision from the get-go with him as a receiver, or just? Yeah,
I don't know firsthand. I think that Bill and their staff have done a really good job of having a vision for a player athletically, and I can't speak for. I remember some early practices with them where, you began to see his role maybe get defined. But I think the thing they do a real good job with is, really harping on the things they feel like a player can do a little bit more than the things that he can't do. And then I think they look at it that way, and they look at it from, hey, what can he give us? And so my guess is there was a plan. I just don't know.
Do you think, now it would be speculation, but I know you commented previously about McSorley at Penn State, looks very athletic with the Ravens. Copycat league, you hear that all the time. Maybe in with Taysom.
Not having paid attention to their practices or depth chart or anything, it could very well be playing him at quarterback, which was his college position. What they're wanting to do offensively, it might be a great fit. So I think that can vary. But I do think teams in general, prior to a selection, talk out loud about the vision for the player and what they see him doing.
Now, Sean, looking at the preseason game coming up, and you're trying to give a running back an opportunity to be productive, is there a number? We say touches. I'm like, okay, we're going to give you 10 or 12 runs.
So look, it's a little bit harder sometimes. There's a play count number, and we take phases. Phase 1's in, phase 2's in, and then while we discuss those phases, we'll talk about, hey, I'd like to see this guy get this. I'd like to see, it's a little bit harder at receiver, but we do try to. And then, as the game's going, if for whatever reason, we talk about play count because, look, one side of the ball might get more of the second quarter than the other, so the other might stay on longer. But, yeah, when we talk tomorrow, we'd love to see this guy get a return. We'd love to see this guy, see how he does in third down. We'd like to see, how the protection is with this combination of players and, what we can do with the linebackers. We try to map out what to expect.
Coach, is there a different level of focus or energy in a game week versus like having to go through?
I think it changes a little bit as you get close to putting on Minnesota film, discussing the Vikings, and now you're gonna face someone else other than yourself. Yes.
Coach, why do you think teams are more open to trying an RPO now versus before? It's been done before.
Yeah, I think we're getting more RPO talent from college, and I also think we're getting some RPO coaching talent. And oftentimes, if there's a conviction or a belief and a knowledge from a coach, then we're more willing to try something. So I think part of it is what we're getting from the college game, both as coaches and as players.
Related to Cook, how similar, or in your opinion, what's the best way to describe any kind of similarities in philosophy between you and John? I mean, would it be the kind of thing where you would say, well, it worked well in John's offense and we're like-minded coaches?
Well, look, my first NFL job at the Eagles in 1997 was working for John. I mean, he was our offensive coordinator, and so I cut my teeth a little bit offensively in his system. And I would think over the years, I'm sure there's terminology differences, but I think, look, John is extremely talented in putting together a plan. Just the installation, the consistency with how you teach and what you do with your players. I mean, some of those things. I mean, it was a great, for me. It was like the perfect first year job in the NFL is really, working underneath him and kind of being a blank tape, if you will.
It's been 20 years, right? So have you guys?
It's been that long, huh?
Has it? Maybe
97.
So
2007.
Do you think you're pretty divergent now?
We're different, but yet there's some similarities. We'll watch and study their film and look for ideas.
How practices kind of change during a game week versus the rest of the?
It would typically change closer to the game in the preseason. So if we were in a regular season, we might. Today would have been Minnesota. Tomorrow, and so in the preseason, you might just devote the last couple leading up to the game rather than the whole week. So that would be the big thing.